An interesting backstory.
I think it's important that everybody knows about the Wizard of Oz.
A professional with decades of experience in her field.
I'm a psychotherapist who works pretty much exclusively with law enforcement officers, as well as other first responders.
Strong opinions and a definite point of view.
What people see on the streets, this job, is not normal.
Brutally honest and funny.
When I get a call in the middle of the night and they've been drinking beer, they're normally crying over a relationship. When they're drinking Jack, they get on the phone and they start off with, "Hey babe."
She identifies problems, probes, pokes, and makes you think.
So if something happens to your family, which is truly your biggest fear, and you haven't thought about every single potential of what could go wrong, then you feel like you failed.
She has her own special style.
You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. Pick a side.
Welcome to StephTherapy911 with Stephanie Samuels.
Hello and welcome to StephTherapy911 with Stephanie Samuels. Tonight I have asked Karen Solomon, who is one of the founders of Blue H.E.L.P, to come back. And Karen and I, over the years, have kind of enjoyed a nice relationship. And I think at the beginning, it was just kind of two people that were trying to figure out each other's goals and where we came from and where we were going and where our hearts were. And I'd say over the past 6 months, really, I've really been able to call her friend and deal with a lot of the frustrations of what it's like to have a not-for-profit, what it's like to be a face of a not-for-profit, and kind of some of the stuff that people don't think about. So I asked Karen to come back on to be pretty real. So there's no makeup on me. I put on my CopLine sweatshirt.
I did just shower, so just so you know, I wanted to be clean.
Look at you.
Yeah.
So you're advanced. I ran from a patient here. So I think that's actually part of what I don't think that people realize is that both Karen and I have very full-time jobs, that neither one of us ended up with a not-for-profit that we make money at, nor fund our lives. And I think like I get emails constantly saying, "Hey, we'd love for you, for CopLine to be part of A, B, and C. We'd love for you to sponsor us." And it's just kind of an interesting thing when you realize that the perspective of people is that somehow or another we have this amazing amount of money and that we can just go ahead and write out a check for whomever wants it.
Yes.
And it's kind of limitless. And yet they don't realize, just like your organization as well as my organization, there's no money that kind of comes out of this. So CopLine's free. Our materials are free. So we have to figure out how to make the money so that we can give out free services. And same thing with Blue H.E.L.P is that you guys send out, different things over time and help, widows. And yet there's no money. So kind of the perspective of that, I know for me, and this is, you and I are similar, is we're kind of very upfront women who could probably use a good sandpaper for our edges.
One way to put it.
Not necessarily like I'm thinking the fine sandpaper, not like, I don't think that we need like the really tough stuff, but
maybe
just
medium.
I'm gonna go with you medium because I'm older, so that I'm on the refined part, but have really been able to piss people off, I think, by honesty and upfrontness, and really not necessarily being able to finesse some of the verbiage. And then I think it gets misconstrued, and then I think it gets run with. And I know for me, part of my struggle when I decided to do Steph therapy, I was like, this is just going to be about, me dealing with just different stressors. I had officers that said, it just doesn't seem fair that other people in the country don't get to benefit, just those of us that are in your practice. So I thought, okay, this is great, until I kind of realized that no matter where I tried to hide, that I still was kind of the face of CopLine. And that no matter what I did, I could easily piss off people and have them be like, you need to listen to this show. You should hear, she's just blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I've had to change sometimes how I react. Like when I'm frustrated, if I'm at a conference, I become acutely aware that I can't necessarily be rude or what have you, which isn't always my intention, but I can be rude. And then how that kind of can blow up in just a place. And I never, growing up, I never thought about being monitored. I never thought about, what it would be like to actually be in a public light. And having so many people that would know me, but me not them.
Right.
And then have to deal sometimes with an unknown enemy of somebody who's now either misconstrued, misinterpreted, or what have you. And that I have to answer to a board and these amazing men and women who are volunteering, and it sometimes it's so overwhelming. And I think that people would say that I am an extrovert, and the truth is I'm an incredible introvert. That if you look for me, I'm typically in the back of a room at some table that just, kind of nervous. And over our time, I remember hearing about Blue H.E.L.P. I remember, it took me a little while to connect Karen Solomon with Blue H.E.L.P. just because it was always Blue H.E.L.P, Blue H.E.L.P, Blue H.E.L.P. But you really kind of came onto this scene 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
Which was, so 2016, we pulled our lines off of Ringing Into My Office. 2017 was our first training out in San Diego. So the CopLine was a not-for-profit since 2009. So, that had been around for many, many years, but this hadn't been, actually 2005. So I remember speaking to you years ago. I was driving actually out in California, and you and I were just talking about, getting articles. Very clear you and I are on the same page. But I just never really kind of connected after that. Worlds just did whatever.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you couldn't go to a conference. You couldn't be part of a suicide prevention program. You couldn't be part of anything without the words Blue H.E.L.P coming up. And when I was talking, I interviewed David Black, Dr. Black, a couple weeks ago. Incredible man.
Yeah, he is.
And we were talking about the IACP and him lecturing, and how, the officer wellness and how that really became significant. And the reality, Karen, that it was Blue H.E.L.P that did it, that Blue H.E.L.P ended up being this incredible organization that became a movement. Because that's the only word for it. You started a movement that has taken on a life of its own. And yet, I know from our discussions, it takes a horrible toll on you. As it takes, a toll on me, but I'm not quite as popular.
I would actually call it popularity.
But how our kids have to be, fear for you sometimes of, people that that could potentially do harm to you and your family. It's just, and for me, I've had many people say, why do you just have the backs of your officers online? Like when I do the Facebook posts or what have you, after they volunteer, it really is to protect them, because there are people that hate cops.
Yeah.
And we have a private Facebook page where you get to see their faces, but that's not for the public. It's figuring out how to protect them. And for you, even more so. And it's such an emotionally charged topic that you picked. CopLine's not a suicide hotline. We deal with, all stressors, including suicide, but statistically speaking, that's not the lion's share of calls. Because statistically speaking, that's not the lion's share of what goes on in a law enforcement officer's thought process.
Yeah.
So, it's, there's a whole lot that goes on, but once the act is completed, once they need Blue H.E.L.P, their greatest fear has come true. So you're dealing with such incredible emotions and such a serious subject. And being a mom and being somebody that works full time. And, there are times when I'll text between patients and I'm like, hey, can you talk? And you're like, I get, I'm on lunch between 12 and, whatever, can you talk then? I'm like, I've got a patient between then. Can you do 15 minutes or whatever? It's just, how do you kind of balance all of this? And where did Blue H.E.L.P come from? What made you decide that you wanted to deal with suicide prevention?
Gosh, so you just said so much I can talk about.
Yep. So no, I can shut up.
So let me just start with where we started. So we started, it was in a nutshell, we saw that there was this gap. There was a gap in law enforcement, that no one was talking about the suicides. And the people that were talking about it weren't talking about it often enough in my mind. So there was no long-term, nobody could say this is really an issue because nobody was measuring the issue. And I'm a big fan of statistics, and you can't understand a problem until you can define the problem. So it just really came out of a gap that we saw, and we would be myself, Beth McGill, and Steve Huff. We were friends. It's just like a weird story how we became friends, but we saw this gap, and we said, hey, we should do something about this. And Jeff said, we should have this officer down memorial page for suicide. So that's what we did. I learned how to do web design over a weekend, got a book, did it, whatever. Because I don't really like to wait for people. So that's also a shortcoming. I just want to get it done. So it came out of that. And it also came out of this, hearing the stories of officers who really, truly needed help, and hearing how they couldn't because of the stigma. And then hearing from the families.
How had you been exposed to them? How had you been exposed to the officers that needed help and the families that needed help?
Oh, because I wrote a book. So after the Michael Brown incident, we, being a law enforcement family, there was some negative backlash on us, and I just got really angry. So I wrote a book called Hearts Beneath the Badge. And then that became a book called The Price They Pay, that I wrote with Jeff about the cumulative trauma for officers, because we just randomly picked officers around the country and asked them their story, and they told us their stories. And then that's when we realized that there was this big issue with stigma. There's this big issue with seeking help. There's this big issue with not supporting the families after a suicide. And then there was an even bigger issue of nobody knowing truly how many officers are dying by suicide. And we still don't know. We have an idea. We have a better idea, I think, now than we did in the past.
Right.
But that's how it started. And it was never intended to be what it's become. And you're right, it has taken on a life of its own. And I sometimes lay in bed at night going, would I have done this again if I knew where I'd be today? And of course I would, because we've helped so many people. But it's not easy because, and I think I've told you this story. I, as a kid, didn't like Halloween because I don't like to be something that I'm not. So I couldn't stand getting dressed up and going out. It made me very self-conscious. I'm in this costume, dressed up as somebody that I'm not, asking for candy. And it made me really uncomfortable. And I can't stand Halloween for that reason. So that's part of the problem that goes to the core of my personality issues, if you want to call them that, the sandpaper issues. You don't have to like me. I don't have to like you. We can respect each other and work together. That's fine. Because at the end of the day, we're just doing a job. I'm not going to hang out with you. If I want to hang out with you, I'll hang out with my friends, So for me, having people like me, inherently, I want everybody to like me because that's how we all are, But at the same time, if I can do something and get it done without having to pretend that I like something or someone, I would rather do that, because to me, it's not comfortable. It's not natural. And I don't like that. I don't know why, but it just bothers me on many levels. So, and it's really interesting that we're having this discussion today, because I was talking to an officer from the UK today, and I actually wrote down what he said, knowing that I was going to be talking to you tonight. So this officer in the UK has been following us for a while, and he's been trying to talk to me for months. And I finally carved out some time on my lunch hour. And he wanted to know how, I did all this and the money and this and that. So we don't have any money, truly. We raise money as we need money. We don't have millions of dollars. And I think that the perception of nonprofits comes from these giant nonprofits that you see who do have tens of millions of dollars. And they're in every profession, law enforcement and cancer and whatever, what have you. But we don't. We've operated on a very tight budget. We haven't had paid employees until last year. So there's a perception that we're this gigantic organization with tons of employees and millions of dollars, and it's simply not the case. I think we've taken in $1 million in the total 5 years that we've been around. So we use the money for what we want to do. So we don't say, let's go out there and get $10 million, because I'm not sure what we would do with $10 million. We obviously we could do a lot with it now, but our goal was to help families raise awareness. So if we need $20,000 to help some families, we'll raise $20,000. It's not, again, not millions of dollars. And raising that $20,000 is super hard. It's not easy. And you're up against other people. So another thing too, when I came into this, I thought it was going to be this great, everybody's happy. It's like a business. You're going to do your thing. Everybody's going to work together, whatever. And it's not like that. It's really competitive. And that's frustrating too, because you're right. If I say or do something negative or that can be perceived wrong, and I do, because I speak my mind, and I have a hard time sometimes, because this is a very emotional thing for me, it's misconstrued or it's taken. And, somebody recently called me out on something I said a year ago. And I was in shock that for a year, instead of just coming to me and saying, hey, I heard this, they just would rather not work with me because they heard something, and that to me, I get it. We all do that in life. But when you're in a business that's as important as this, I think that's, you just you have to try really hard to put your personal feelings aside. And I try very hard. I don't always succeed. God, I'm certainly not perfect, but that's a really hard thing in this business, because you're right. You are out in public and everybody sees you and everybody listens to you. And it's not easy, because I get an emotional hangover when I come back from a conference, because you have to be on your game. You have to smile. You have to be polite. You have to be aware of what you're saying, so you're not angering anybody. And then you're also absorbing all this trauma from all of these people who want to talk to the suicide lady. That's what I've been called, and they want to tell me the story. And that's a lot to take in. And it wasn't what I intended, but I'm capable of handling that emotional trauma for the most part. I mean, you've helped me through a few rough spots recently, but, I think for me, the passion in doing this was having attempted suicide 3 times and surviving. But by the grace of God, I'm here. The 3rd attempt, I very well should be dead. And spending a lot of my life wondering why I'm still here, because surviving suicide isn't, it's always a struggle for the rest of your life. Now, for me, it is, maybe not for other people, but it also makes you wonder, why am I still here? And I finally think I found why I'm still here. So anyway, back to this officer in the UK.
No, I want the rest of that sentence. You finally figured out, you think you figured out why you're still here. And that answer is?
Because we changed history for law enforcement.
We did. Yes, you did.
Okay. And I don't want to sound like an egomaniac. And And that's why I hesitate a lot when people interview me, because to me, we just did what needed to be done. But to other people, they put us on this pedestal, like you say, it's Blue H.E.L.P, Blue H.E.L.P. And we're just three people in our bedrooms on laptops doing our thing. And to us, it's not, we just did what was, yeah, I don't know how to explain it. So to us, it's not, but
Right.
I know how people see it. I know we changed the landscape. I know that law enforcement suicide data collection bill wouldn't have passed last year in June had it not been for Blue H.E.L.P. I am very well aware of what we did. But so for me, I feel like perhaps it was for me to save people from what I went through and save families from what I put my family through. So, so maybe that's what it was, I guess, that's what, it's not a guess. I really truly believe that I finally figured out why I'm still here, and I mean, that's going to sound, people go, what about your husband and your kids? Oh, of course I'm here, but I didn't have husbands and kids.
I was going to say that back then that they weren't in play back then.
Yeah, so, no, but there was always something greater. I think that it's like that movie, It's a Wonderful Life. I think about that a lot. How, when you look back at his life and saw all the people he affected, and everybody needs to think about that. So, people say, you can't talk somebody out of suicide by telling them that they're being selfish, because it's not selfish, but because they're all the people in their life that they were going to impact if they left. And it's really truth. And you can't talk somebody out of suicide using that, but you can realize what that truly means. Because if I look back, my son, I don't know who would have adopted him if I didn't adopt him, if I hadn't been around. Who would Blue H.E.L.P be here? I don't know. There's a lot of little things in your life that you look back and go, what would have happened had I not be here? So, and this is the bigger thing. This is the huge thing, the Blue H.E.L.P. All the other things are the course of life, but this is tremendous. When you think about what we did. Again,
absolutely. I mean, and I understand your concern, your hesitation, your whatever, because you don't want people. And again, it's that whole, I'm under a magnifying glass that if people hear this and they misconstrue it, I'm a megalomaniac.
Exactly.
Whereas what I'm saying is, this organization that got started by three of us has taken on a life of their own. And I'm glad that I could carry this child for 9 months. But after birth, it takes a village to raise a child. Blue H.E.L.P was raised by that village, but you're always going to be one of the moms of Blue H.E.L.P. And that is the reality. CopLine has been able to, we have some amazing people that are doing social media. I don't know how the hell they come up with it. So one of them is a retired volunteer who's an officer who ended up retiring after a critical incident in his wife. But, every now and again, there's a couple that just hits my heart. It was last week, I think, that it said, suicide doesn't stop the pain.
It just transfers it.
Yeah, it passes. I was like, oh, that's good. Yeah. I was like, that is just so perfectly put. So,
and see, that's what's funny is me being hypersensitive to anything I say. I'm even afraid to say that because I don't want people to think that this person should feel guilty because if they take their life, they're going to pass their pain to somebody else. So everything is a double-edged sword, everything.
So I want you to finish the story about the officer in the UK.
So the officer in the UK.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people contact me. They don't realize that I actually do have a full-time job. They think that this is my full-time job, and it's truly not. So how do you run a nonprofit? And some people who figure out that it is not my full-time job, what's the work-life balance, all that stuff. So anyway, this officer wants to basically do for the UK what Blue H.E.L.P has done for the US. And he wanted to understand. And, again, he thought we had millions of dollars. I said, listen, you can run Blue H.E.L.P on $50 with this website and all of us volunteers, but then you can't send out care packages, you can't have a fund, you can't do this, you can't help the family. So trying to explain to him that he could get started without all this. And he said I reminded him of Margaret Thatcher, which I thought was really funny. And he said that he has been playing small, trying to appease everyone. And he said, I have a feeling you've made enemies because I've seen you speak. And I said, yeah, I definitely have. Yeah. I said, I definitely have. I said, and I know people don't understand me or whatever it is. I said, but I think what I told him is I really believed something other than I believe today. You know, I thought it was going to be hearts and roses and it was going to be so simple. And by now we would have millions of dollars and we would have quit our jobs and we would be saving people and raising awareness and helping these families. So I told him that what really he needs to do is reconcile himself to the fact that, yes, he is going to make enemies and people aren't going to like what he has to say, especially because it's uncomfortable. What we did was really uncomfortable and we pushed the envelope every chance we get. You know, we took our families to police week and we were told we didn't belong there. So we're constantly trying to put them in the spotlight so people see that this is a real issue and it needs to be fixed. So he said, so it sounds like you speak truth to power. And I didn't hear that either before. But he's afraid to say what needs to be said in the UK because he's afraid he's going to make enemies. And I told him at the end of the day, you know, you're going to make enemies, but if we were afraid of that, if we had turned away the first time somebody got mad at me or the first time a bigger organization told us to step aside, we wouldn't be here. It would, you know, the person who said, you know, I've been doing this for 20 years, you don't deserve this kind of recognition. Well, if you've been doing it for 20 years and it's not working because we need to do something different, you know? So he's very afraid of that. But I told him, if you're really passionate and you care about what you're doing, the people that need to hear you are going to listen. And the people that need you the most are the ones you're going to help. So if the president of the United States is mad at me, or the whole US military is mad at me, who cares? Because I gave something to somebody, I saved an officer, or we sent a care package to a family and they got it just in time when they were feeling really sad and then they didn't feel alone anymore. You know, we had a dinner and these families came and got to meet each other and they've made lasting friendship. If somebody doesn't like me, big deal. They're not coming to my funeral anyway. Who cares? You know, whatever. So I know that sounds really flip and I'm much more sensitive than I sound. But at the same time, it doesn't stop me from keeping doing this, you know.
So I know for me, I get anxious
to do this in the UK because he's afraid of what that backlash is going to be and what that spotlight on him is going to be.
I know for me, I've struggled with being anxious.
Yeah.
That as tough as I appear to the world, it is my family that gets the lion's share of my insecurities, of my, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I'm not going out tonight. Go out without me. That kind of overwhelming cloud that sometimes feels so heavy that, you know, that I just want to run away. And there are times when, because, you know, I'm a runner emotionally, I'm a runner physically. And I just, you know, there have been times really late at night where I'll put on running clothes and my husband's like, it's pitch dark. And I'm like, fuck it. Like, if I die, I die. He's like, no. But it's just, and so few people understand. And I know it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today, where I wanted this to be realer. You and I have shared real, and one of the few people that I share real with, because you understand the layers, the true layers of this onion.
So I just want to go to your thing about running. And this is similar. So again, and this is, you know, obviously very personal, but I truly do not like to speak in public. And you would not know that because I know I'm very good at it. So I don't usually bring a script. I don't read off of paper. I know what needs to be said and I say it and I memorize my statistics, whatever it is. And I just can't stand it. And I can't stand traveling. And every time I travel, I can't sleep while I'm away because I'm stressed out. I cannot tell you how many nights I've laid in bed, panicking. I'm getting on the next flight out. I'm going to leave my laptop with my presentation outside my door, and whoever comes looking for me tomorrow is going to have to do the presentation because I'm gone, you know? So I get it. I do. It's not easy. And we put on these faces and people think it's so smooth and so easy and like, oh, and I'm not saying this for sympathy, and I don't want anybody to think, oh, Karen's incapable of running Blue H.E.L.P, because that's not it either. It's just a natural.
I'm right there with you. So if you want, vote me off the goddamn board. I'm good. Vote me off.
It's just a natural thing. It's a stressful thing. When you choose something that you care so deeply about, and it doesn't matter how many other people are already in the pond, you can reach people that don't want to get in the pond with the others. You know, they might want to get in with you. So that's why it's important to stick with it. So, you know, I can lay there and panic. I don't want to get up there. I don't want to get up there. I don't want to get up there. I don't like talking in front of people. I'm afraid that nobody's going to like me. It doesn't matter because I'm not going up there for people to like me. I'm not going up there because it makes me comfortable. I'm going up there because I want to do something that helps somebody else. And you know, it's a small sacrifice, you know.
I'm always afraid that I'm going to sound like an idiot.
Oh, always. I probably do sound like an idiot, and people just, I don't know, think that's great.
And I'm always afraid that people are going to be like, she's a fraud. She doesn't know what she's doing.
Yes.
So, you know, and I remember so the first time, so you and I had spoken for, you know, what at that point was years periodically. Don't want anybody thinking that you and I were, you know, fucking, you know, pen pals on the phone. But the first time that you and I realized that we were going to be at the same place was in Florida. And I remember going there. And I'm like, hi, because I'm thinking to myself, I'm all alone. I'm scared to death. You don't know the other side of me. You don't know that I am scared to death, that I am as uncomfortable as you are. I have no idea that you're uncomfortable. So I'm like, Karen Solomon is here. Blue H.E.L.P is in the house. They're testifying. I'm here. I've got all other crap going on from other things, you know, from the past and whatever. So, and Janice is there, and Janice I've met. So, you know, thinking, okay, this is great. And I remember kind of feeling like we didn't connect. And it's like you were there and what have you. And it wasn't until afterwards where you and I had that real conversation. This isn't Blue H.E.L.P. This isn't CopLine.
Right.
This is Stephanie and Karen. And I'm like, you know, I really didn't think that you liked me. And so I
can't connect. When I'm at events, I cannot connect to people because there is an expectation of Blue H.E.L.P is in the house. So I can't be myself. I can't tell the stupid jokes. I can't be inappropriate. I feel like I'm representing these families and these other people, and I can't be myself. And that's a really hard thing. So I try to say to myself, or I seek out somebody that is comfortable. And even then I don't really talk to them. So, and then, you know, you're not supposed to take a drink or do this or that. You should go to your room after the event and not make us, you know, so there's all these rules about trying to be a leader. And we're all leaders in some way, but leadership doesn't come naturally. You have to work at it, you know? So for me, it's walking into the room and, oh my God, are you Karen Solomon? And yes, I am. And, you know, then I have to be Karen Solomon. I have to be Blue H.E.L.P. I can't be Karen Solomon. Let me put it that way. I have to be Blue H.E.L.P.
Yeah,
that's the problem. And I have a very hard time connecting with people because I also don't know what they want from me. I mean, do you want me to help you? Do you need something from me? Are you just here to find out what we're doing so you can go do it before we do? And that's a problem in nonprofits, you know? And then like you said about money. So we have given away small grants, you know, $2,500 here, $3,000 there to people or organizations who want to have an event or do some suicide prevention training and they don't have the money. And they'll ask us and we'll go, okay, well, you know what? We happen to have this much money. You guys, how about we give you this? It doesn't happen very often, but we've been able to do that. So I get very stressed out because I don't know why people want to talk to me. And again, it's that whole thing of I want to be social on my terms and not on the Blue H.E.L.P terms. And again, that sounds like I don't want to be Blue H.E.L.P, but it doesn't. It's just what you do. If I was the president of the United States and I had to walk out on stage. I'd have to walk out as the president of the United States, not as Karen Solomon. So Karen Solomon's personality goes in the back and Blue H.E.L.P comes out front. And so that's a hard thing for me. Because again, it's me not pretending, it's me being who people need me to be, as opposed to being who I am or I want to be. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I actually loved that interaction because I loved the post action. I loved being able to get, I think you sent me an email or a text or something, and I was like, Karen? And I remember calling you and I said, I didn't think you liked me. And you're like, what gave you that idea?
Yeah.
And then realizing, oh my God, Karen Solomon is human. She is as anxious as I am at these things.
Yeah.
And I could no more give to somebody who was needy that day because I wasn't doing great.
What's funny is you sat 3 rows behind me to my left. You were 2 seats over, and I kept looking at you, and you were looking away or looking down, and you looked really stressed out the whole time. And I kept looking at you, trying to but you never looked up. So it was funny because I was like, oh, she doesn't like me. And I'm like, I know I'm really bitchy when I get to conferences. But again, it's that whole
well, I went to
knowing who wants to talk to you. And also, I don't want to feel like, oh, I'm Karen Solomon, you should all talk to me. And then I don't want to impose on people. Because to me, these people are people who have been in the profession longer than me. They have their PhDs. They're better than me somehow. So for me to approach them is also very difficult. And then, like you say, when people approach me, like David Black or somebody, and they go, oh my God, are you Karen Solomon? I'm like, yeah, what do you want? Because to me, I'm just doing my thing, just doing my thing.
No, it's just, it is interesting. And I don't think that people realize, that there's kind of these two worlds, and it's not that they're completely different. I mean, Stephanie Samuels is still, founder of CopLine. I think for me, one of the things that I take offense to is, it's not offense, is that people don't realize that I've been a clinician for, over 30 years that has only worked with law enforcement. Mm-hmm. So that CopLine was my pay forward, that I had written legislation that I knew years ago what needed to be done, what would work, really felt strongly about it. Yeah. Got absolutely kicked, pummeled on dealing with it, and came up and continued to do it. But at no point in time, my career is always being a therapist working with law enforcement. Yeah. So when people just get to know me, they think that CopLine made Stephanie and not Stephanie made CopLine. Right. I don't want to be known for CopLine. I want to be known as a really good therapist that made a huge difference with my officers. That's what's really important to me. I'm thrilled that CopLine does what it does, but I have little to nothing to do with that success. My amazing volunteers, don't get me wrong, I'm damn good at vetting. I'm damn good at training, but I'm not the lead trainer. Jane Agneman's lead trainer, he's phenomenal at that. My expertise, my slice of pie is in PTSD. That's the slice I train on. But other than that, these phones are being answered 24/7 by retired officers. Right. The only thing I do, I'm the voyeur. I'll text them and be like, hey, great call. Or, hey, you doing all right? It seems stressful. Big fucking deal. That's not, I'm not on those, I'm not front line. And what I'm also acutely aware of, God damn it, I've never been on the front line. Your husband's on the front line. God bless him. Not me, not my family. I've had a daughter now in the military, but, thank God right now has not been on front lines, could be. But I've always had the light lift. So don't give me the kudos. My life's never been in danger. And CopLine is amazing because those men and women that have always had the heavy lift continue, damn it, to do it.
Yeah. And I think too, that's part of, I think, this is going to sound weird. So and because we're not egomaniacs, I think we tend to be less successful at certain things, because maybe the fundraising, because we don't want to go out and ask for it because, do we really need it? What do we need it for? Make sure we have an actual need for it. And that's just hard to go out and ask, because you're just saying, why is somebody going to want to give it to me? As opposed to somebody going, they're going to want to give it to me because I'm Blue H.E.L.P. So that's a hard thing. And then understanding that, where your place in the world, so to speak, not that it's a bad or anybody's less than, but my kids, like, we joke a lot. I always go, hey guys, I just called from the FBI. Now you think I'm famous? They're like, no, Mom, you're not famous. My son, Nick, recently was giving this lecture on somebody he thinks is famous and blah, blah, blah. And he's got a following and, he's relevant. And I said, honey, I said, using the context that you just used, that would mean me. I said, because there are people who think that I'm important and I do have a following and this and that. And he's like, Mom, no, you're not. You're not. He goes, because you don't make millions of dollars. And that was one of his things, because this was it was something to do with the stock market. And I said, you don't have to make millions of dollars to be, a celebrity, because I'm a celebrity in some circles to some people. I said, but it doesn't, so you're a celebrity in some circles to some people, but he values celebrities at how much airtime and how much money you have. And I said, that's not what it is. A celebrity, it can be defined different. So, and that's what I've always told them, because, Nick, he wants to be successful. He wants to do this. And I keep saying, Nick, honey, I go, you got to find something that you love. And when you love something and you put your heart into it, it's going to make a difference. And he goes, but Mom, you're not making any money at this. So he goes, so success is measured differently, and your place in the grand scheme of things is measured differently. And I think that the most humble amongst us, and the most, I think this is where things start and change. So yes, Blue H.E.L.P. started a movement, and maybe at some point someone is going to capitalize on this movement, and good for them. But that's not we don't know how to do that, so that's part of the problem. And I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that's just the reality. I think things like this, change like this, starts from the heart and from somebody like you who just did it to pay it forward. I did it to pay it forward. And then at some point it gets bigger and better than us, and so be it. That's what happens.
And I do believe, if it was a kid that I carried for, I say 9 months. I think it was more like a fucking elephant's pregnancy of like 18 months. I mean, it was just, unbearable. But, and then no matter when it got birth, it was a premature birth. Like I would have to, wake up, and it was on oxygen. It needed all sorts of stuff to make sure it survived.
Let me ask you a question. So whenever I think about leaving Blue H.E.L.P, or because, some days I get tired and some days I'm frustrated and sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? I just feel like crying, because I'm like, how can I leave this? This is my baby, like you. It's like, it's a part of you. Do you feel like that about CopLine?
It is. Yes. And my fear is probably less now than it was, because it's not that complex. Because it really is a hotline that's answered by retired vetted officers. So I think that's pretty easy. I think the sadness of the leaving it is if it should veer off.
Right. That's my concern.
The other piece is, like, I know how vigilant I am with checking to make sure that that my volunteers are taken care of, that after calls they're done, that clinicals followed up on, that when emails come through to CopLine, that I am really quick. I can't tell you how many times people are like, thank you for getting back to me so quickly. That will anybody else love it?
Yes.
The way that I do. Will somebody wait 24 hours? Be like, oh, well, they can wait. Whereas I'm like, if it's 24 seconds, it's long. So I think it's more along those terms of, if I'm not here, I know that CopLine will survive, but who's going to love it the same way? And the answer is probably no one. But I'm not ready to find that out. I kind of, my gift was, which I think you knew, that when I was a teenager, that Teen Line Care. So it was a hotline or a helpline for teenagers that was answered by teenagers. So that's kind of where my this idea grew from was that, teens did really well talking to teens. And so Dr. Elaine Leader founded Teen Line Cares. So we're 40 some odd years later. Elaine is 92 years old, still sees patients herself. And after my daughter met her, she's like, "That's you, Mom. You're going to be 90, so you're still going to see patients." But I just had such a rewarding experience. It was really interesting because she'd been the executive director of Teen Line since it started. And so I got a phone call a few years ago saying that they knew that they were going to have to find a new executive director, and they wanted, teens that had been on the lines, back then, and, had pursued a career to be involved with what they thought was important, that Elaine Leader wanted her predecessor to be the right predecessor. And I thought how gracious that was, that I would love the opportunity to pick my predecessor, that knowing if I can't do it, and Elaine still holds the title or what have you, and I can't tell you how invaluable she's been with CopLine.
I gotta tell you something funny to that end. Yeah, so because we don't think we're irreplaceable, right? We know we can be replaced, but it's just that we love this. It's our thing. We started it, right? And we don't want to let it go because we love it so much. We want to make sure it's better. So for me, I'm at that point where I know it can be better. And maybe, so there's a thing, oh God, I can't remember what it's called, founders syndrome or something, where the founders hold back the company. It's actually a real thing, believe it or not. So, you wonder. So
I figure out who coined that one, but go ahead.
Yeah, but it's a true thing. So are the founders holding the company back, and do you need to find new people? We've been expanding our base and adding more people and stuff. And I'm in the position where I can pick my successor and all that stuff. And I plan to. So it's funny because the person that I'm working with right now, we laugh because I told her, I said, I'm like peanut butter and you're like almond butter. I am this like sticky, annoying kind of, can be too not smooth enough that it's kind of abrasive, but people like it. And sometimes it gets left behind and makes
too much salt.
Yeah, so that's me, right? But she's like almond butter. She's smooth. She knows what to say. She presents well. She dresses well. Where I like have animals that I pull out of the closet, and she's, people like it. People like almond butter. She doesn't leave a mess behind, So it's funny because you try to figure out what it is that is needed next, and they don't need another Karen Solomon. So, we still get a lot of interview requests, and they don't need that. Well, we want to talk to Karen Solomon. No, you don't. I've said my piece. I did what I needed to do and brought the emotion to the forefront. Now people want to know more about the data. They want to know more about the culture of law enforcement. And that's not me. I'm not a cop. I've never have been. I spoke for the last few years because I wanted people to hear all of these stories I've heard. And if you want to hear a story, I can make an audience cry in a heartbeat by telling you the stories of these families, But the things change, and they evolve. And especially for something like Blue H.E.L.P, where we did what we set out to do, and now we need to go to the next step, so what that looks like. And that's a hard thing, again, because you love it, it's your baby, and you want it to stay true to what you want it to be.
We had a when COVID hit, going on that, and I love that. I love what you're talking about. I love the understanding of growth and what needs to be done. And when COVID had hit, and CopLine training, everybody was on Zoom. There's all sorts of questions of, do you continue to train? We absolutely needed, because our call volume is up, we needed to train. And so now came a spirited conversation with the board, which is, do we train? And how do we achieve this? Because every venue was shut down.
Yeah.
So, and I remember saying, because I felt so strongly about face-to-face, and I said, I don't want you hearing this as a threat, nor me having a tantrum. I truly believe that if I am impeding the growth of CopLine, I need to be voted off.
I've offered to leave if I felt I was impeding. Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
You offer to leave, you know it, and I know, and and in our hearts. And at the same time, I think that it's not truly time to leave, because if it was, I want to leave if people feel like I need to leave, but that's not the time, and that's not your time. But when you'll know when it's time to leave, and I will know.
I mean, I assume so, but for me, because it really came down to, computers, so that, so the board was talking about, being able to set this up. And if we can set up this, then our trainings would be easier, because then we could incorporate far more volunteers from all over the country, et cetera, because the cost for our volunteers is incredible. Their expenses to come out wherever we are, to give up 45 hours of their life to do this, that we do not reimburse for. And you might not end up being an active listener on the lines. There's no guarantee.
That's amazing.
So it's huge. So the board's now talking about being able to do this, via Zoom, being able to figure out the breakout groups. And I said, I am not a fan of that. It doesn't ruminate with me. You need
is it your age or your skill set?
So both. But you've got to understand that when COVID hit, my patients still wanted to see me face to face.
Yeah.
That I still went into my office. If I was in town, damn it, I was in my office.
Yeah.
If they are out there doing that job, so am I. So these retired officers that always knew that there is an invisible enemy. Every one of them survived the invisible enemy because they retired. And now I'm going to tell them that I know what's best for them. They shouldn't come. Bullshit. The bottom line was, if you wanted to do this face to face, we will put every single precaution in place to do this successfully, but I cannot tell you it's not risk-free. And so the decision was, after, I'm telling you that it was spirited, that, and obviously, other board members also felt, strongly as I did, that we were gonna move ahead, and just very grateful. We ended up doing 2 trainings during COVID. This last one in February, we moved to April, which is a large group now, and then another one in May, which will actually be our first East Coast one here in Jersey. Yeah. Jersey.
Maybe I'll come. Maybe I'll come visit. Maybe I'll come sign an autograph for you.
That's great. Maybe you can sign my right boob.
Sure.
That just offended somebody. Sorry.
Absolutely.
But it just so being able to really kind of understand, because the truth is, if the board felt strongly that this is what needs to be done, and I don't have that vision, I truly do need to be able to hand this baton over to somebody who can take it to the next place. And, it's, and I have no doubt I'm going to fuck up the biblical story of the mother who had, a child, and that, it was a father. No, it was a man that was fighting over one child, 2 women.
They split the child in half.
And they, and they said, and when
nobody got it.
No, the one woman said no. So 2 women were saying that they were the mothers, and one said, we'll split them in half, and the other one said,
that's right.
And the other one
the
said,
mother
no.
was the one who didn't want to split it in half.
That child's yours. That and
obviously
that's
we're both very religious.
And that's how the God or whomever knew who the real mother was, because no mother would ever do harm to her child. And that's how I feel with CopLine, is that I would never do harm to CopLine. I'd never intentionally do harm to CopLine. It's probably the purest thing in this lifetime that I've ever created was CopLine.
Yeah.
There's no money. There's no, there's really no benefit personally for me that I get out of it. I can look at anybody, tell them to call. There's no money. There's nothing involved. I'm not going after grant money. I'm not going after federal money, none of it. So, so I can love it enough to give it to somebody. And I think you're the same way with Blue H.E.L.P, is that if that's what it is, and as difficult as it is, but if I can watch it flourish and still stay true to the mission, and for you, listening to you, what's really beautiful is your initial mission has been met. And being able to we're talking about law enforcement suicide, like people talk about where they're going to go for dinner. It is not a taboo. You and your vision, the three of your visions, removed the greatest stigma. Now, when we go to conferences, name the conference does make a difference, and everybody's oh, I'm great. And I think to myself, are you fucking kidding me? If you're so great, you failed, because we still have suicides. Like, I'll tell you, when all of us get to pump our chest is when we have 0 people. Otherwise, we are all in this together. Let's figure out, we give as many tools as we can. There is not one solution, for God's sakes. Figure out what works, and let's just keep doing it. So to be able to just talk about it, you can't go, look at the FOP, National FOP has got an officer wellness program. I mean, that this has become so important in our society because you guys had a vision, and your tenacity, and honey, it's tenacity. It's not it's not being rude. It's not in your face. It is tenacity that made sure that you called up the law enforcement magazines. It was that tenacity that you can call up different people and you can get articles, and that they want the numbers. How many times is Blue H.E.L.P's numbers quoted in everything? I remember years ago when I am picturing him. Oh my God, help me out here. Basketball player that ended up with AIDS, Magic Johnson.
Okay, yeah.
So Magic Johnson ends up with AIDS, and actually HIV positive. Amazingly, he is not. He has never had an AIDS status. So, the entire nation was like, "Oh my, this is terrible."
Right.
Magic, blah blah blah, and he had come out saying that he had had over 20,000 partners. And I remember Martina Navratilova saying, if this were me, I would be a whore that deserved it.
Yeah.
And that perspective, and I had no issues with Martina, and I have no issues with Magic. It's just a perspective on a nation.
Yep.
So the perspective of Karen's abrasive is the tenacity.
And the thing is, I've never really, said anything that's not true. I just said what people are afraid to say. And I get it. And I was telling this officer in the UK today, I said, every time I was given the opportunity to speak early on, when I got to speak at the NYPD perf event, when I was given an opportunity, I just said, if this is my last time ever to speak, what do these people need to hear? And that's what I would do. And and it just came out of the moment. Again, I never bring a script. I don't bring I don't know ahead of time what I'm even going to say. I just know the statistics that I need to spew out. If somebody asks me, I know the stories. I know. So I just had to gauge what's going on and what needs to be said at that time. And obviously now, it isn't going to be the last time I speak. So I try to make it as important as I can. And it's still with that. Yes, is this going to be the last time I speak? But the things that need to be said, I've already said them, and people listen, because we were constantly in their face. And you can't speak to law enforcement leaders or any leaders I was given a great opportunity. For instance, The FBI recently called me to sit on their task force, and I'm at work. I got 10 people yelling because there's not enough copper on the floor, and my son has a doctor's appointment, and the FBI's calling me, and I'm just like, what alternative universe do I live in? So I was given this gift, this opportunity to do something, to be in front of these leaders, and I just did what I would have done it anyway, whatever the cause is, So I think that it's again, yes, it's seen as abrasive, absolutely. But I just said what everybody else was afraid to say. And I think that's the difference between being abrasive. It's not as if I went out and made stuff up and, I was giving them statistics, facts that we collected, real people, real stories, but people were so afraid to hear it. Now they're not so afraid to hear it.
Right.
So now I'm not as abrasive, I guess.
And I know the end of the NYPD story because I actually had a friend of mine who was there.
Oh, really?
And the end of the story is that you were the only one that got a standing ovation.
I did. I did. Yes, I did.
So, and for your line workers, for your worker bees that were there that day, is you gave them their voice.
Yes. Yes. And that was it. So yeah, that was a really powerful day. That and another event that I went to, and I got a standing ovation. It was the first time in the history of the event, which had been gone on for 20 years. I was given 8 minutes to speak, and I spoke off the cuff, and everybody was crying. And so I think again, it wasn't what I was saying. It's I took the people's stories, the family stories, the officers' stories, and I gave them to other people. So it's not even as if it was something that original. It wasn't something that I came up with. It was, I just took what I've heard and handed it back to the people that needed to hear it. And that's really truly all it was. It wasn't like I did a research and wrote a paper. I just gave them what they needed to hear. So I think that that's very powerful, is the emotion. And I think that so many people in the audience could relate to it, and they could see themselves or feel themselves in it. And having somebody give that to them and give them that kind of affirmation is very powerful, whether you realize because at the time I didn't realize what I was doing. I was just trying to make a point and tell them, this is what I know. These are the families, these are the officers, and here's what we're doing wrong and what's wrong with you people. And I did say shame on everybody in this room. And that was very abrasive, but I said it. And it is what it is, So I get it. I do. And I'm glad that I was able to be the conduit for people.
They talk about advocates, just needing advocates. And I know for myself with my officers, whether it's fitness for duties or whatever it is that they're going through, I have no issues with talking to a chief. They're not my chief. I do not need to refer to them as chief. I get to bypass a chain of command. I'm acutely aware of that. And the position has certainly earned respect, which I will give them. But I am also a tremendous advocate for my officers. And sometimes that requires a mouth. And I think at the end of the day that the chiefs have appreciated that. As a matter of fact, I know that. As a matter of fact, I will share with you a story. I had an officer who was out due to anxiety and depression, who had been suicidal, who is under my care. And the department had a system in place where there's an SOP that he had to call out or what have you. They would literally, he lived 60 miles away from work. They would send a car every day outside, and it triggered him, hence triggered the panic. It was just mass. So I ended up putting in writing, because they jam him up. They jam him up. They now tell him that he has to be in internal affairs in an hour, except he now takes a Xanax, so he can't drive. He's not going to internal affairs. So I now write a letter to the chief. And in the letter, I write that under his leadership, it does not surprise me that he has had 3 officers in the past 2 years that have died by their own hands. So anyway, you can imagine this letter hit, I get a phone call from one of the people that does fitness or duties, and he says, "What the fuck did you say to Chief so and so?" He's like, he is screaming, he's gonna have a heart attack. I'm like, I don't know. And
Yeah.
then because it's like weeks before, it's like he said something about a letter. I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the only thing I can remember about the letter, quite honestly, is that I told him that it wasn't surprising that 3 people had died in the past 2 years by their own hands.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
He's like, holy shit.
But
So
it's not, you're just saying, you're stating a fact.
Oh yeah.
Well,
So
it's not surprising, kind of isn't a fact, but.
so it took the chief. So it took this really, I guess, nice finessing in the back. So it took the chief a few days to call me. And the chief called me up and he said, "Is Miss Samuels, Chief so-and-so." He said, "It's taken me a couple of days." He said, "That letter was quite something." And he said, "You have now asked me to change an SOP." He said, "I can't do it." He said, "But what I do realize is that after I calm down, that you are probably the greatest advocate that a cop could have, and that you went after the chief of police in one of the largest departments in the state of New Jersey."
Good for you.
He said, "And you managed to piss me off enough," he said, "to be reeling for days." He said, "Should anything ever happen to me on this job, you are the one I want to see."
And that's, it's funny because you talked about our relationship, and that's the one thing I realized over time with you is that we are very similar in so many ways. And you are not afraid to say what needs to be said, and you do advocate, and you care so deeply about what you do that, and you're not in a kind of a, you're in a different kind of a spotlight, and what you do, I don't think people realize what you do and how good you are at it. Because I remember the first time I called you when I was just stressed and needed somebody to talk to. I got a phone going, holy crap, I need to move to New Jersey so she can be my therapist. You're really good at it. You're in tune with the people you talk to. You understand where they're coming from. You're excellent at what you do. So in addition to having that skill of being able to understand people and what's going on with them and pinpoint their issues, you are able to also, like you just said, advocate for them because you're ready to stand up for them because you do understand, you do understand what they're going for, and you know how important it is to them. So that's a great thing for you to have.
And I do feel that if we had more people that could advocate, and that we're seeking help, that we really could affect the change, and that the Blue H.E.L.P wouldn't be needed, the CopLine wouldn't be needed,
not needed.
And obviously that's not going to happen. And
remember, somebody commented on LinkedIn. You made a comment on my post saying something about we should be out of business or something, and they said, "Oh, Karen Solomon, no more suicide. Stephanie Samuels, then we won't need each other." And I'm like, yeah, that's the end game, right?
I know. Well, when I read that, I was like,
it was kind of funny because I was like, are they saying? I'm not really sure if that's a positive or negative comment.
I was like, I was right there with you, and I don't know if anybody knew. Like, you and I are just we're trenches people together. So I don't know if they're trying to do like a CopLine. I'm like, Karen, like, we would love not to be needed. Like, that would be great. Like,
I'll find something. I will lay on the couch and watch Lifetime television for women all weekends. Are you kidding me?
So that was interesting. But I will tell you that chief ended up being able to figure out how to keep his SOP in place, how to, and for us to be able to work together. And it really ended up being beneficial for everybody. And that's really what it's about. It's about advocating.
Yes.
And you're far more of the advocate. So I do in my private practice something I really don't do for CopLine. CopLine is different. And Blue H.E.L.P needed that. And you and I have impacted, many officers in many different ways from our willingness to truly put ourselves out there.
I agreed. And I think, I've referred quite a few people to CopLine, and they've, followed up, circled back, saying they've gotten help and whatnot. And the fact that you are able to train these people and know what they need to be those retired officers, to be on that phone, to give the people what they need is tremendous too, because you can't just throw a bunch of people in the room and train them and tell them to answer a phone. It's got to be, it's specialized, it's specific, you have to understand. And you do understand, or else CopLine wouldn't still be around.
And training is so difficult. It is so emotionally charged. I mean, watching these officers so often just on stuff they never dealt with. And I always say to them, I will find the nook and cranny, not because that's what I'm intentionally doing. It is just the training itself. It is good training. Yes. It is what it is. But no, absolutely. So,
and I just need to make a clarification. I didn't actually get a standing ovation at the NYPD. I got applause, and I was the only person who got applause.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was. I don't want people to go, "Oh my God, Karen said you got a standing ovation."
Yeah. You
all
are
the
right.
same people spoke. They moved on to the next one, but people clapped when I and no one else got any applause that day. So I was just thinking that, and it was troubling me.
Yeah, no, and I'll stand corrected on that. But
you and I both.
Yes. So if your kids wanted to start a not-for-profit, so I'm going to kind of end with this, would you tell them to do it?
Oh, I would tell, obviously make sure it's something that you absolutely, truly love and you can throw your heart into, and that you can speak to it passionately, because if you don't believe in it, no one else will. Somebody recently, they were on another nonprofit board, and they said, I don't believe in this anymore. And I said, if you don't believe in it, no one else will believe in it. So you're a bad rep. You need to leave. If you don't believe in what you're doing, no one else will. The second thing would be to be better at be good at relationships, because those relationships, they do become important. And I do have some very great, very solid, very loyal relationships, but I could and should have more. But I tend to want to, I work to get the job done and just keep going, go to the next one, go to the next one. And you can't do that. You can do that in professional, private sector where I work and thrive, but in the nonprofit sector, relationships are just tremendously important, and you need to build them and cultivate them and keep them and never forget them. And again, even if you don't like somebody, you respect them, you work with them, and you find a way. And the third thing I would tell them would be to have a plan to fund it, because that's the biggest stressor. Just have an idea of what you're going to do, research the funding before you do it, because the funding came for us after. It was more of a let's just get this done. So if you want to sustain and really be able to do something long term, make sure you have the relationships, you have the funding, and it's something that you truly, truly love. That's about it, really.
So is there anything I haven't covered? Anything that you wanted to?
Oh, and a good attorney and a good accountant. So that's really important in the nonprofit.
That is the foundation of life, but.
That's everybody. After your life insurance, get an attorney and accountant. Yes.
Anything I haven't covered? Anything that, should this reach 100 million people, that you want them to know?
Oh, if they would all give me $1, I'd have $100 million. We could do this forever. No, I just want to thank you. Because this was not, your typical talking about Blue H.E.L.P and stuff. So, and it is personal, it's hard to be personal. I think, again, is you want people to see what you want them to see. And I don't always, and I think you're the same. So I appreciate the candid talk, and I appreciate everything you've done. And I guess just for the record, because everybody knows how emotionless I like to be. I'm not an easy person to connect with. So it's funny that when you describe our relationship evolving over time, and it's not that I don't want to connect with people. It's the trust issues. It's the afraid to let people in issue and all that kind of, emotional, psychological stuff. So becoming friends with you has been very good for me. It's been, I appreciate it. And you are you're a much better friend than I am. You're a good friend. So anybody who has you as a friend is super lucky, because you are truly, the check-ins and just your perception and knowing what's going on with people. You're a good friend to have. So if anybody's watching and you need a new friend, Stephanie loves getting all kinds of random people calling her because she needs more.
And friendships built on mutual respect, at this point I haven't needed. And and you and I don't peck each other for, to death. That's the other thing is, it's easy to be able to say, if there's something personal that I need to run by you, I will. But,
Yes.
If I want something posted with CopLine, we have a relationship where you can say, that's just not, ruminating, and it's not going to be like, ugh. Like that's,
Right.
you and I have built the relationship that says, okay, it just doesn't mean that the next time when something comes out on social media or whatever, I'll say, hey, can you do this? And if it matches, because that's a friendship.
And you're very candid too, right? So, and that's the thing, you're not a Halloween costume, So for me, I'm good with that.
Yeah,
you
no.
know?
And I think that's, I wanted to do this. I wanted to do this for both of us. So this is somewhat selfish because I think as we have grown and continue to grow, that it's really important that people understand that not-for-profits have nothing to do with limitless amounts of money. That people,
Yeah.
that the faces behind this have jobs that pull at them, that there's huge financial responsibilities in our personal worlds that our families depend on, and that we have our own crises in our own worlds that we're trying to navigate while we're trying to take care of something that also means the world to us. And it's just, and how,
And there's a lot of people out there like us running small nonprofits,
yeah,
making a small dent in the world.
absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for really, thank you for being able to talk about the word suicide. Thank you for being able to talk about suicides with police officers. I don't know if in this lifetime you'll realize that impact, because you have, the old, you can't see the forest through the trees. But thank you for giving all of us, including me and every patient that I see, the ability to talk about this. The IACP, the FBI, a world that says, hey, this part can be prevented. We need to talk about it. So thank you. And thank you for being real. And thank you for being my friend.
And you're welcome. And thank you for being my friend, despite my stickiness and abrasive corners.
All good. All good. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all for watching and for listening. And I look forward to seeing you next week on Steph Therapy 911 with Stephanie Samuels.